Huge thanks to everyone who did send in questions. It helps a lot, and obviously couldn't do it without you guys. Sorry for the noise, we did film on a busy London streets, and do hit that like button for more awesome interviews like this one. Check out our website at TechteamGB.co.uk for more info on both this and many other products, and also up-to-date news on all things tech. Stick around for this awesome video. So hi guys, and welcome to TechteamGB. Today we're going to be doing a really exciting video with an interview from AMD. So Richard Huddy's here, and he's going to take it away with who he is and what he does.
Okay, nice simple introduction. I'm Richard Huddy. I am AMD's Chief Gaming Scientist, and that means that I have two responsibilities inside AMD. Both of them are communications roles. I work with games developers to understand the tech that they're building, why they're building it, and to ensure that our future GPU designs take into account the considerations of games developers insofar as they can. Sometimes games developers want unrealistic stuff, and we need to tell them that. Sometimes they have aspirations which really open up possibilities that we never thought of before. They're a great bunch of people to work with. So that's obviously covered by NDAs, and I can't go into any of those discussions. But I also have a role which is this that you see now, where I'm talking on behalf of AMD, trying to explain why we make some of the decisions that we do, where the future lies in the tech industry, and in particular the kind of hurdles that we have to overcome that are not obvious to everyone else.
Yeah. Obviously, the first question is said should be fairly easy. So, what, in obviously your opinion, what are the first, the main real-world benefits of HBM?
So HBM, high bandwidth memory, is a very cool new piece of tech. It's an industry standard, but you see it first on the Fiji-based chips from AMD. That's things like the Fury X and Fury. Now, high bandwidth memory is fundamentally different from its predecessors. If you look, it's suddenly going to become a tech lecture instead of a quick two-second answer on the benefits. If you look at the performance characteristics which define what we can achieve with the technology that we build, there are two really important exponential graphs. There's a steep one which goes this way. I've turned it round for the viewer, and that one's the kind of growth of GPU horsepower with every generation, and it's nice and smooth. It goes up very steeply. We can double the number of transistors every 18 or 24 months, that kind of thing. But we have another curve that we don't talk about so much, partly because we're not so proud of it, and partly because it isn't usually under our control. And that's the shallower exponential curve, still exponential, but it's constantly being left behind, and that's the growth in memory bandwidth. The amount of stuff you can put into or take out of memory per second grows, but grows relatively slowly. So instead of that doubling every 18 months or 2 years or so, we see a doubling every 4 years, something like that. And that's very painful. A factor of 2, every 2 years we get slower, in effect. Now, HBM takes that situation and grabs it by the scruff of the neck and fixes it for a year or two. And actually it's going to scale very well into the future as well. It takes that curve and it gives it a huge jump upwards, so the amount of bandwidth that's available to our GPUs is radically, dramatically improved. Instead of having to work really hard to build something which has 300 or maybe 400 gigabytes per second of bandwidth, with HBM1, what we've built into the current generation of Fiji chips, with HBM1 we can generate 500 gigabytes per second, half a terabyte a second of bandwidth in a very small package. It's an extraordinary thing. To be able to do that and put it onto the same package as the GPU instead of having a heat spreader that sits on top of all these extra chips is an amazing achievement. It really is. But being able to give you so much more bandwidth, in fact we can give more bandwidth to Fiji than it can consume. We've built Fiji with the idea of it consuming around 350 gigabytes a second, and of course with HBM we exceed that by a healthy margin, and it creates a most unexpected result. Quite a few people compare HBM with GDDR. So GDDR5 is the existing high-end memory solution, and if you look at GDDR5 solutions, you'll say, well, there are 4 gigabyte and maybe 8 gig or even 12 gigabyte solutions out there. So 4 gigabytes of HBM, that's surely lacking, yeah? And the truth is it doesn't lack, it exceeds the capabilities of even 8 or 12 gigabytes. And the reason for that is there is so much bandwidth inside HBM that if you have system memory, we can swap memory around inside the machine, swap between HBM and system memory, and keep the working set in the 4 gigabytes, and it never gets in the way of the GPU. So my oh my, that's a really long answer. What happens is you effectively get rid of the problems of frame buffer size. And the extraordinary result that comes on the back of that is when you benchmark a Fiji chip, at 1080p, we're around a 980 or thereabouts. When you start winding the resolution up higher and higher, you would think that our 4 gigabytes would start to become a limit to the headroom, a bottleneck. But far from that. Actually, as you wind the resolution up, we get better and better, and we start beating a Titan X, and indeed we consistently beat it if you go to high enough resolutions. So HBM is absolutely the future of memory, and to be able to play with it this time around as a company is awesome. To be able to productize it and generate a product which has some really excellent performance characteristics, that's phenomenal. Not a short answer, I'm afraid, but the real truth is it's a drastic change to everything that's been going on in memory. We fix that shallow curve that has held us back for years.
It seems really good as well, with obviously the power efficiency bonus that you get as well with having it as sort of, as I remember seeing the keynote with 1.5 times performance per watt.
Hugely more efficient. Yeah, it's extraordinary. The fact that we can put all the memory onto the same package as the GPU not only saves us having to take up space on the circuit board, but that means that we are actually been able to manage the power of all of those parts in a single small space. From a technical point of view, one of the most extraordinary things about it is the way we build that bandwidth up. In a let's see, in a 390X or something like that, we wind our memory up to 1.5 gigahertz. It's super fast. And each chip is 32 bits wide, but we build 8 of them on in this cluster around the GPU. So we have a 512-bit interface, so we build 16 of them around. Huge cluster of memory chips around the GPU. For a Fiji, that's not there. You don't need any of that. And instead, inside this silicon package, we have an extraordinary 4096-bit memory interface, which is just insanely wide if you're trying to build a PCB. It's so many traces that the PCB is vast. But we can build it and it can be small. It's all inside this package. And because it's wide, we can run it slow. And slow, oh, wait a minute, that's a negative word, isn't it? But when you build a GPU, what you do is you build a processing unit which is wide and slow. Typically they run around the 1 gigahertz kind of frequency. If you look at high-end GPUs, that's what they run at. That's slow compared to CPUs. CPUs run 3 times as fast. And yet GPUs are monstrously powerful compared to CPUs. And it's because we build them wide and slow. And we've done exactly that with HBM. It's super wide, 8 times wider than the widest we've ever built. And we run it slow. We run it at 500 megahertz. Totally different dynamics, and therefore wildly power inefficient. To go further into more detail here and make it very difficult for the reader, sorry about that. When you double the frequency at which a chip is working, you typically draw 4 times as much power. So if you took a 500 megahertz bus, which is what we're running this HBM at, and were to take it up to the same kind of speed as GDDR5, we'd be running 9 times as much power, but we've got it 8 times as wide. Everything works out beautifully. It's a superbly balanced piece of hardware. It's really extraordinary.
Sounds fantastic. Alright, so to follow on with the hardware topic, what are obviously Zen coming up as an essence, and what are AMD's plans to improve on the FX series and the FX lineup to compete with people like obviously competitors like Intel's X99 platform?
So I can't go into any significant detail on what's going on in Zen, beyond saying that we plan to be super competitive on big core, x86 big cores. So we are absolutely ambitious about what we're intending to achieve with that. I'd say one other thing about the FX series that exists at the moment. The FX series often gets knocked for not having the performance that it might have. And typically the reason for this is because people look at single core performance. One of the most interesting things that's happening through 2015 is the introduction of DX12, which is really great at using multiple cores. And that means, I believe, that we're going to see a significant enhancement to the perceived performance of the FX processor. And it's because its horsepower really is there, it's just not always demonstrated by apps, by games and so on. But those games which move to DX12 and make a serious attempt to use all the horsepower in all the cores, they'll see some significant benefits right now. And to be fair to AMD, we've done a lot of pushing on, particularly with Mantle, on the multi-core APIs to make sure that the value in our hardware is truly exposed. So that's I think all I can give you in the short answer I'm going to give you here.
All right. So on a more, we're talking about DirectX 12 there. So what's the obviously you released Vulkan fairly recently, or announced it recently, and so I'd like to know both what's the sort of difference between Vulkan and Mantle, what's been changed, what makes the difference in DirectX 12, and what's the hardware benefit in terms of, for example, AMD CPUs that you get from Vulkan or DirectX 12.
Okay, so Vulkan is really fundamentally tremendously close to Mantle. In fact, I saw Johan Anderson from DICE comment fairly early on that it looked suspiciously familiar, because the truth is we gave all the source code for Mantle to Kronos, and we said, here, we think this is a beautiful foundation for your next low-level version of OpenGL. What do you think? And having spent some time going through it, fundamentally it seems that Kronos agreed with that. It is very, very much like Mantle. I'm not aware of any substantial differences, except it is of course more generic, and that's an attractive thing. Games programmers or workstation programmers too don't want to target just one vendor, unless there's some special reason for doing that. So making it a little bit more generic has not been hard. The primary benefit is what we've talked about with Mantle 2, that it delivers all of the capability of the platform in the user experience. It's very straightforward for a games developer to get hold of the benefits of every single core, of every single GPU, so it has an explicit multiple adapter approach to revealing the hardware. Instead of hiding them behind the API, they're now out in the open with the CPU cores that was already designed into the API, but now we see it really fully realized. So this is AMD's vision come true for a whole industry, and it's a great place to be.
Yeah. So in terms of DirectX 12 and obviously hardware benefits, where are we on with sort of what are we looking forward could look forward to with that one?
So DX12, you don't have a long time to wait now. 29th of July, if you're fortunate enough to pick it on day one, and I expect to. DX12 delivers on all that kind of promise as well. So terrific exposure of the CPU cores and the GPUs, whether there's one or more in the system. That's really good. You get all of the horsepower that you want there. There is a nice new feature which is coming in both Vulkan and in DX12 as well, called asynchronous compute shaders, which means that, or actually more accurately, asynchronous shaders, which means that you can run a shader and expect it, if you have a good hardware implementation, you can expect it to potentially overtake other work that's in the queue. Now, typically, a GPU does things completely serially. You give it a piece of work, you give it a second piece of work, then the first piece of work always completes before the second piece of work. And they can run in parallel on the machine in the sense that number one is finishing off while number two is starting, but you don't get two overtaking one. That never happens. With asynchronous shaders, a programmer is allowed to say, hey, I'm okay with this one coming first. It won't break the rules of ordering in the code that I'm writing, so if it's possible, let it overtake. Now, DX12 doesn't require that this is sufficiently fine-grained in terms of hardware implementation that job 2 can overtake 1. It just allows you to set up the queues that will work. But the reason that it's in DX12 is because of the kind of capability that we have already exposed on our consoles. So Microsoft, obviously deeply familiar with Xbox One, beautiful piece of work, and they expose the goodness in the hardware. One of the things I had a conversation with a games developer at GDC this year, back in March. He came over to my table for breakfast and said, are you Richard Huddy? I remember you giving a lecture 10 years ago. Can I just chat to you about what I'm doing? And I sat down and talked with him, and I said, so what's the stuff you're doing? And he went into asynchronous shaders. On the Xbox One, what he does is he writes a visibility test and he writes some rendering. He puts the rendering into the queue, and the rendering is heavyweight task. It takes a long time to complete. But he runs a visibility test, which is a relatively simple compute task, and he puts that into the pipeline and says, look, if you've got a chance, can you just run this at a lower priority than, but maybe alongside job number one, the graphics rendering. And to his considerable impressive feelings, he sees that the compute task comes out of the pipeline before the graphics task, but does not slow the graphics task down. It's put in at low priority, but it's a low weight task. And what happens is, in a GPU traditionally, all our GPs, everyone's GPUs work this way, you find bubbles in the pipeline. Sometimes we categorize the work that a GPU does as memory limited or ALU limited. Sometimes you are heavily ALU limited. You're just doing a bunch of maths, and that's a typical compute task. Sometimes you're just memory limited. You're drawing the sky or something like that, where essentially you're writing out data to the sky with almost no lighting information whatsoever. It's all pre-computed. It's just memory comes from here and goes to there. And as you shuffle this memory around, the ALUs are completely idle. The memory's working like crazy, and the ALUs are saying, can I have anything to do? Anything. I'll do anything. Just give me something to do. But they're silent. They're idle. Now, with the parallel compute capabilities of a GPU, you can see what's in the offing there. If you're able to put two jobs into the queue, and one of them is ALU heavy, and the other one is ALU light, memory heavy, then you can actually find these two executing at the same time. And clock by clock in AMD's GCN architecture, we will switch from one task to the other. So if we're stalled waiting for memory, and that happens, then we do some compute. And if we're stalled waiting for compute, we go off and do the memory. And the amazing thing is we see up to a 40% benefit. Now I understand this is a synthetic case and it's designed to have a look at this kind of situation. But where we're doing a regular standard kind of graphics task, where the GPU is 100% busy, you have to follow the numbers here, and as soon as I get to the end you realize how mad this is. You've got a GPU which is 100% busy, you give it a small compute task, maybe something of the order of a quarter as big as the graphics task, you insert it into the pipeline and it just fills up bubbles, just gaps in the pipeline, and it comes out at the end without having slowed the graphics task down. It was 100% busy, now it's 125% busy. For all practical purposes, that's what you can achieve. That's a really strong advantage to DX12, the fact that we can fill bubbles in the pipeline. And as far as I'm aware, AMD is the only one that has this true fine-grained parallelism in the compute queue and graphics queue that we run. But it is absolutely part of a standard API. Microsoft want to expose it, quite rightly too. It's a clear advantage.
Sounds amazing,
So anyone who can do it should do it, and anyone who can't do it should learn to do it, add it to their GPUs. It just improves GPUs for the future. And that's a really big deal for us. We're very excited about having it exposed. No big surprise.
It sounds amazing, So I was back onto more sort of hardware side. We had a question from a viewer which we're talking about, a little bit blunt, but with the R9 300 series, I guess he put it as it's quite a rebrand, isn't it? Very, very similar performance, and obviously with 8 gigs RAM, but is it not very, very similar in that sort of sense?
It's a very interesting question. So what it comes down to is what constitutes a new generation of GPUs, I guess. And for us inside, we would absolutely say that the R7 300 and R9 300 is a new generation of GPUs. They not only have different internal code names inside, which is probably a bit of a clue that we've done a significant amount of re-architecting, but there's some things that you can see fairly quickly. Number one, it's built on a different process technology. So we've taken the more advanced 28 nanometer and we've tweaked that. We have a more power efficient version. So we have had to make changes to the silicon. There are some cases where you see clock for clock better performance. Tends to be small changes because these are still based upon the GCN architecture. We don't simply revise our architectures because we can. That would not be a highly productive route for us to take. But if you look at something like the R9 390X and you look at the power efficiency of it, you'll see that we're roughly 15% more power efficient than the 290X. That's not an insignificant change. It doesn't come for free. And if you start benchmarking it and look at the general profile of it as a 4K experience, which is where you recommend it, you will see it significantly outpaces the 290X. So we don't simply build stuff anew because we could. That would be highly wasteful of resources. AMD has other things to do. You know, we have console platforms that we've built. The Xbox One and PS4 cost a significant amount of engineering effort, so we decided to dedicate substantial resources to that, obviously. These days we're on the new GPUs and we will refresh them at some point in the future as well. But we don't simply build stuff which is new because new is better. If we can make it better in other ways, then we do. If you look at Fiji, which is arguably the most revolutionary GPU on the planet, it has at its heart the GCN architecture. Does that mean people should look at it as lame and old? It's the most advanced GPU on the planet. No, absolutely not. That'd be crazy. So I think new for new's sake, that makes no sense. Look at the value that we offer and make a decision about whether it makes a sensible choice for a purchase. I think it's fair to say if you own a 290X, you probably wouldn't be thinking about a 390X as an upgrade, because the step forward is relatively modest and you have to buy a new graphics card. But if you're in the market for a high-end graphics card, then a 390X is a terrific place to go. And if you want to go higher still, of course you can.
Yeah, so Fury and Fury X.
Exactly so, yes.
So I guess to round off, probably the last question actually is quite, I guess, an interesting one. So with obviously the evolution of silicon and getting smaller and smaller and smaller with different process nodes and that sort of stuff, when do you think we'll see AMD processors running on non-silicon? Because obviously we're getting to that point where silicon's starting to break down and not work anymore as a transistor.
It's a very, very interesting industry that we've been in for 40 years and more. AMD's been around for 46 years now. That's nearly as long as I have. We've been able to build silicon processors and roughly follow what we all know as Moore's Law. But there are a couple of things which are happening in the industry which are disrupting that rule at the moment. Number one, as you say, silicon runs into issues around 5 nanometers or thereabouts. And it's not clear that it is possible to go significantly beyond 10 nanometers to 7 or not. I suspect it will be, but that doesn't mean that we can definitely get to 5 and then 4 and then 3 and then 2, etc. The other thing that happens is the number of companies in the world that are capable of building these highly complex silicon devices tends to shrink with each generation. As you move from 130 nanometer ages ago to, what do we go to, 110 and then 90 and so on, what we saw was the number of companies that could build highly sophisticated chips fell. And we are now at the stage where we're down to the last 4 or 5 or 6 who can really play in this area. And if it works out that with each generation you lose another one, or maybe you half the number of foundries in there, then we are going to be up against problems. Certainly our conversations inside AMD with partners like TSMC and with Global Foundries suggest that the expense for them of simply halving the size of the process is very, very high, and it continues to escalate. And this is not just like inflation, where you and I expect a 2 or 3% pay rise, or maybe a 10% pay rise. You know, it's not like that. It's that the cost genuinely doubles, and that creates problems, economic problems, for going to 5 nanometers and beyond. There's value in going there, but you have to have very, very large scale to justify that. So I think all I can really say, rather than telling you on what year we'll go non-silicon, is that there are some very complicated dynamics in this industry to do with cost, to do with the genuine difficulty of it, and to do with the scale of production, which suggests that this curve is going to slow down. We won't be able to follow Moore's Law if we follow traditional computing as we have over previous decades. But it's not clear to me that the next 10 years are in any great danger. Yeah, we do have steps from, remember, we're producing 28 nanometer chips, and some of them are really, really tremendously awesome. That gives us enough generations to keep going for a significant period of time. And that's great, because if we've got the time for those foundry partners to solve the problems, then maybe we can get another generation or 2, and maybe we can go over to quantum computing or whatever else it might be that is the next step. So I remain optimistic about the future, but I don't know what the future is. That's okay. That's true for everyone. I trust we're all optimistic about the future.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Cool. It's an interesting area, though, certainly to look at.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the future. See what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be much more fun than the past.
Yes. So thanks for watching this TechteamGB video. Huge thanks to Richard for coming down and chatting with us today. Just obviously thank you, and it's been great fun and obviously great experience for us as well. So thank you for that. And
my pleasure, Andrew. Let's do it again sometime, yeah? And thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. It's been fun.
Yeah, so I hope you learned something interesting here. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below and we'll pass them on for you. And yeah, other than that, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already for more awesome tech stuff. Hit the like button if you like it, dislike if you dislike it, but leave us a comment and let us know what you thought of the video. If you want to see more interviews with awesome people such as Richard, then as I said, let us know in the comments down below. And otherwise, we'll see you on the next video.
Thank you so much.
So thanks for watching this TechteamGB video. You've probably heard enough of me already, so I'm going to finish off by saying please subscribe if you haven't already. It helps us out a hell of a lot, and it means that just the world to us in general. Please do feel free to check out some of our recent videos both down below. They're more recent ones and they're certainly awesome. Feel free to click my face for the website and click all the links over there for our Amazon affiliate link, our social media, and also our YouTube channel as well. Other than that, as I said, please subscribe, like, share, favourite, and all the other many things possible, and we'll see you all in the next video.